right now, I mean, literally right at this second, in a grocery store aisle somewhere, a shopper is, they're using their smartphone to instantly invalidate millions of dollars of corporate marketing.
Yeah.
And they're doing it in like under 10 seconds. They're scanning a barcode, looking at an app, and basically deciding that a product their family has bought for 3 generations is suddenly no longer safe to bring into their home.
It is a phenomenal transfer of power. I mean, we are watching the complete dismantling of legacy brand authority, and it's happening, one barcode scan at a time.
Oh, wow. Yeah, well, welcome to today's deep dive. For you, our resident learner, our mission today is to explore this really seismic shift happening right under our noses. We're looking at how the safety of everyday product ingredients, things like PFAS, microplastics, those so-called forever chemicals.
Okay, the big ones.
Exactly. How all of that has morphed from a dry, highly technical supply chain headache into this massive, immediate, and honestly volatile test of brand trust.
Because we're moving from the realm of chemistry and supply chain logistics directly into the realm of human psychology. And for a lot of legacy companies, I mean, that is a terrifying transition.
Absolutely. So we're pulling our insights today from Denise Drummond-Dunn's C3 Centricity Marketing Deep Dive series. Specifically, we're looking at her really extensive analysis on rebuilding consumer trust and, reigniting momentum for consumer packaged goods brands.
So, okay, let's unpack this. The core premise Denise presents is that consumers are completely done waiting for brands to issue these polished, heavily lawyered PR statements to reassure them.
Yeah, they're over it.
Right. They are investigating, they're drawing their own conclusions, and they're switching brands entirely on their own.
So to really grasp how to solve this, we first have to understand the sheer scale of this behavioral shift. The fundamental narrative in the consumer's mind used to be implicit trust, like familiarity basically equaled safety.
Sure. I recognize the logo, it's fine. Exactly. But that is completely inverted. The baseline assumption is now implicit suspicion. It's, I need to check before I trust. And we have the data to show this isn't just, some niche group of hypervigilant shoppers haunting the natural foods aisle. It's a transatlantic paradigm shift.
Right. So what does the data actually look like? I mean, are we talking about a vocal minority on social media making a lot of noise, or is this a broader movement?
Oh, it is overwhelmingly broad. According to YouGov data that came out in May 2026, 78% of Americans are concerned about the safety of ingredients in their everyday products. Food, cosmetics, personal care items.
Wait, 78%?
Yeah, nearly 8 out of 10. And half of them say they are actively more concerned today than they were just a year earlier. Furthermore, 57% have actively avoided certain products or brands specifically because of these ingredient concerns.
So over half the country is effectively boycotting products based on ingredient anxiety alone. That's wild.
Yes, and 61% are demanding manufacturers provide greater transparency. And if we look across the pond, the UK YouGov data mirrors the sentiment almost perfectly. I mean, 61% of Britons are concerned and 44% are already avoiding products.
Wow.
But if we want to look at actual behavior at the shelf, Acosta's 2026 research shows 58% of all shoppers are habitually reading labels before buying a new item. And if you look at health-focused shoppers, that number jumps to 87%.
Okay, I have to stop you there. 87% of health-focused people reading labels. I mean, that sounds like classic survey bias to me. Are people actually standing in the store analyzing chemical compounds, or are they just telling surveyors what makes them sound like responsible adults?
No, it's a completely fair challenge. I mean, there is always a gap between stated intent and actual behavior in surveys. However, we have to look at the mechanism that actually enables the behavior today. 10 years ago, reading a label meant trying to pronounce 16-syllable chemical names and just giving up. But today, the barrier to entry for investigating a chemical compound is a smartphone. The consumer doesn't really need to read the label. They just scan the barcode.
Oh, right. The apps do it for them.
Exactly. The app cross-references the ingredient list with toxicity databases and just gives the product a red, yellow, or green score. So even if that 87% figure includes some aspirational survey answers, the technological friction to actually perform the action has practically dropped to zero.
Yeah, I mean, going grocery shopping now feels less like running an errand and more like being a TSA agent.
Right.
You're just standing there in the aisle, frisking and interrogating every single bottle of lotion or box of cereal before you grant it clearance into your cart. But, I mean, if the sheer familiarity of a big legacy brand used to be enough to lower our perceived risk, Why has the balance of power shifted so completely overnight?
Well, it really comes down to who controls the narrative. Because of that democratization of information, the apps, the really aggressive online reviews, the social media explainers breaking down supply chains in these 60-second videos, a shopper can find a challenge to a brand's claims instantly.
Right.
A brand prints, natural and safe on the front of the box, and the consumer finds a breakdown of the microplastics inside before the box even goes into the cart.
So the brand is essentially being fact-checked in real time by the consumer right at the point of sale.
Precisely. Now, does that mean the consumer or the app always interprets the complex chemical science accurately? Absolutely not. I mean, dosage, exposure pathways, and context really matter in chemistry.
Sure.
But from a business perspective, the scientific accuracy is almost beside the point. What matters is that the brand simply no longer controls the first explanation of what is in their product. The consumer finds the critique before the brand even realizes the consumer has a question.
That's a huge shift. And it's not just consumers acting like detectives either. Regulators are doing their own frisking, and they're enforcing some incredibly hard stops on certain chemicals. So this consumer anxiety is basically on a direct collision course with very strict, very real legal deadlines.
Oh, yeah. And the timelines are brutal. We are measuring these deadlines in months, not years. Let's look at France, for instance. They adopted a law in 2025 that strictly restricts PFAS, those forever chemicals in consumer products, and that includes cosmetics, textiles, and ski waxes.
Wow.
And that restriction kicks in starting in 2026.
Okay, so that's right around the corner. But France is just one market, right?
True, but the broader mechanism is the EU's packaging and packaging waste regulation. This generally applies from August 12, 2026. It sets strict PFAS limits for all food contact packaging. And here is the crucial functional mechanism. The European Commission guidance states there is absolutely zero transitional period for exhausting old stock.
Wait, hold on. Meaning if a brand printed 10 million cereal boxes in Vietnam last year and shipped them to a warehouse in Germany, they can't even sell off that old packaging once the deadline hits.
Correct. If that packaging has PFAS at or above the limits, and it is newly placed on the market after August 12, 2026, it is illegal.
Oh my God.
The financial write-off potential is massive, and it's forcing companies to overhaul their supply chains immediately. And it doesn't stop there. You've got ROCH, which is the massive overarching framework for chemical regulation in the European Union, and they're restricting PFHXA.
Right, that's a specific subgroup of forever chemicals, isn't it?
Exactly. And those restrictions hit cosmetics and food contact cardboard in April 2026, with further bans hitting clothing and footwear in October 2026.
Okay, so that's Europe. What about here in the U.S.? Because it usually feels a bit more, I don't know, patchwork over here.
It is more fragmented state by state, yeah, but the federal direction is identical. Right now, the EPA is drafting its 6th contaminant candidate list. They're functionally reviewing massive groups of contaminants, specifically targeting microplastics and PFAS, with public comments actually due by June 5, 2026. The regulatory net is tightening globally, and it is tightening fast.
Right. But okay, I have to push back on the corporate structure side of this, though.
Yeah.
Because if this is fundamentally about chemical limits, EU packaging bans, and EPA compliance, isn't that just a massive headache for the chemists in R&D and the lawyers in the legal department? Why does Denise Drummond-Dunn's research frame this as a massive crisis for a mid-level marketing or sales manager?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at how a corporation actually interacts with a human being. I mean, yes, R&D owns the chemical formulation, procurement owns the supplier contracts, legal absolutely owns the regulatory compliance.
Right.
But marketing and sales, they own the moments where trust becomes visible. They own the narrative.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Think about the mechanics of a formula change. Let's say legal and R&D realize a shampoo needs a new preservative to meet an EU deadline. They change the formula in a vacuum, optimizing purely for legal compliance and shelf stability. But they don't give marketing a human-centric, understandable explanation for the consumer.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So when the new bottle hits the shelf, a consumer flips it over, sees a different ingredient list, or worse, sees a sudden, now PFAS-free, sticker right on the front.
Right, and my immediate thought as a consumer is, wait, was I scrubbing my scalp with PFAS for the last 10 years? Have you been brazening me?
Exactly. The facts sit in the legal department, but the emotional fallout, the trust consequences, sit squarely on the shoulders of marketing and sales. If the marketing team hasn't anticipated that emotional reaction, the brand looks incredibly vague, highly defensive, and ultimately guilty.
Man, Which brings us to a massive dilemma. What happens when the legal reality of a situation moves faster than a brand's ability to tell a coherent story? And the source material gives us three very distinct, real-world examples of brands handling or, well, losing control of their trust stories.
Right. And we have to start with the ultimate cautionary tale of what happens when a brand loses the narrative entirely. The most visible example is the Johnson & Johnson talc litigation. Now, to maintain absolute impartiality here, we must state the facts clearly. J&J explicitly disputes all the allegations.
Yes, understood.
They maintain, backed by their own research, that their talc products are safe, they are asbestos-free, and they do not cause cancer, and they are actively appealing the massive verdicts against them.
Right. But setting the underlying science aside for a second, what do the actual mechanics of the legal and financial fallout look like? Because that's what's staggering.
It is a rolling narrative disaster. Reuters reported that in October 2025, a Los Angeles jury ordered J&J to pay $966 million, though a judge did later throw out the $950 million punitive damages portion.
Still, that's huge.
Then, in December 2025, a Baltimore jury awarded more than $1.5 billion in another talc case, which J&J stated it will appeal.
Yeah.
And beyond the individual lawsuits, in June 2024, Reuters reported J&J agreed to a $700 million settlement with 42 U.S. states to resolve allegations of misleading marketing practices, though they did so without admitting any wrongdoing.
I mean, those numbers are just staggering. But what is the takeaway for consumer goods brand manager listening to this? Because they aren't the ones litigating the science in a courtroom, you know.
The business lesson isn't really about the science. The lesson is about the mechanics of distribution and trust. Once the courts, the media, regulators, and consumers seize the narrative, the brand entirely loses the ability to define itself. Think about a retail buyer at a major supermarket chain. They see billions in lawsuits on the evening news. They don't wait for the appeals process to play out. They just pull the product from the shelf to avoid consumer backlash or secondary liability. The conversation is happening to the brand, not with the brand. And once you lose your shelf space, the brand is functionally dead.
So that's obviously the worst-case scenario when you lose the narrative. But what about navigating the pressure as it's building in real time, like before it gets to that point?
For that, the sources point to P&G's Tampax. In 2024, a shareholder advocacy organization called As You Sow filed a formal resolution requesting P&G disclose their PFAS-related risk management practices.
But wait, if they aren't purposely putting forever chemicals into tampons, why did they get a shareholder resolution at all? That feels like a trap. I mean, the instinct for any corporate PR department in that situation is to freeze up and say absolutely nothing until legal gives them a zero-risk statement.
And historically, that was exactly the playbook. Say nothing. But Tampax didn't stay silent. They understood the mechanics of contamination. You see, PFAS isn't always an intentional ingredient. Sometimes it's a contaminant that sneaks in through, like manufacturing equipment lubricants or the coatings on the wrappers.
Oh, interesting. So it's incidental.
Exactly. So Tampax clearly stated on its own ingredients page that it does not formulate any menstrual products with PFAS. But importantly, they went a step further and explained that they actively work with their supply chain partners to eliminate any unintentional presence of it.
They addressed the nuance. They didn't just say we're clean. They explained the messy reality of manufacturing and showed they were actively managing it.
Right. And this raises an important question about the modern definition of transparency. Because they had that nuanced narrative ready in public, the shareholder resolution was ultimately withdrawn after an agreement was reached. The lesson is crucial. In today's landscape, silence is always interpreted as uncertainty.
Yeah, and uncertainty breeds mistrust.
Exactly. And mistrust spreads infinitely faster than the actual facts.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. We've seen the cautionary tale. We've seen a brand navigating the pressure. But the source material highlights a gold standard, SC Johnson. And the way they operate, I wouldn't even call it a PR strategy. It's more like they decided to build an open kitchen in a restaurant.
Oh, I love that analogy. Break down how you see that working.
Well, okay, a traditional consumer goods company operates like a restaurant with a closed kitchen. The customer sits out front, eats the food, and just hopes the back room is clean. If a health inspector, or in this case, a regulator or a suspicious consumer with a barcode scanner demands to see the kitchen, the restaurant panics.
Right, they're scrambling.
Yeah, they have to scramble to clean up and formulate a defense. But SC Johnson built an open kitchen. They just knocked down the walls entirely. The consumer can literally sit at their table and watch the ingredients being mixed. They never have to panic about an inspection because the process is entirely visible by default.
That is exactly the mechanism. S.C. Johnson treated transparency not as some defensive campaign, but as permanent infrastructure. And they started long before the current panic. They launched their U.S. ingredient disclosure program way back in 2009.
Wow, 2009.
Yeah. They published their fragrance palette in 2012. They added skin allergen disclosure in 2017. Today, they share more than 99.99% of fragrance ingredients on a product-specific basis on their platform, what'sinsideSCJohnson.com.
And think about the B2B power dynamic there, right? Like, fragrance is notoriously hidden behind trade secrets. S.C. Johnson had to go to their suppliers and demand the chemical breakdown of proprietary scents, basically risking supplier relationships and intellectual property just to serve the consumer's need for transparency. Over 99.99%, they are practically handing you the recipe.
They did it because they recognized the modern shopping mechanism. When a shopper inevitably searches or scans their product, the brand's own detailed human-readable answer is already the top result.
It's just there.
Right. They never have to be forced into a defensive posture, scrambling to align wording across 5 different departments, because the trust asset was built years ago.
Okay, so if you are a brand leader today and you're staring down this regulatory storm, you realize you need an open kitchen. You get it.
Yeah.
But how do you actually knock down those walls and build that infrastructure before the crisis hits?
Well, Denise Drummond-Dunn provides 2 highly specific frameworks to help organizations turn technical risk into consumer confidence. The first is called CATSIGHT.
Okay, so how does that actually function in practice?
It fundamentally grounds the brand's response in consumer reality rather than the company's internal anxiety. The functional mistake brands make is treating ingredient anxiety as a technical problem to be solved with chemistry facts.
Right.
CATSIGHT recognizes that this is an emotional problem. It demands that brands analyze the actual language consumers use in reviews, in complaints, and on social media.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because nobody is standing in the cleaning aisle trying to earn an honorary degree in organic chemistry. They aren't looking for molecular breakdown.
Exactly. The human truth driving all of this scanning and researching is a desire for control. Consumers just want to feel confident that they are responsibly protecting themselves, their families, and their homes.
Right. It's about safety.
Yeah. And if your brand dismisses their concern as irrational, or if you swing the other way and dump a dense 40-page technical manual on them, you fail the emotional aim. You have to use the CATSIGHT methodology to determine if the consumer needs scientific proof or if they just need simple, empathetic reassurance. You meet the anxiety where it lives.
That makes perfect sense. It translates the chemistry into empathy. And what about the second framework?
What's fascinating here is the second framework, QC2, which looks completely inward. It is a methodology designed to locate and eliminate organizational friction.
Like the turf wars between legal, R&D, and marketing we talked about earlier.
Precisely. Think about the conflicting KPIs in a corporate building. Legal is incentivized purely by risk reduction. R&D is incentivized by formulation stability and performance. Procurement is incentivized by cost certainty, finding the cheapest supplier. And marketing is incentivized by telling a compelling story.
So they're all pulling in different directions.
Right. If everyone is optimizing only for their own departmental outcome, the consumer receives a fragmented, defensive, and often contradictory message.
Like legal says, say nothing. R&D says the new chemical works, but it separates if it gets too hot. Procurement says it's 4 cents cheaper per unit. And marketing is just left holding the bag, trying to sell a product that suddenly acts differently without being allowed to explain why.
Exactly. So the QC2 framework forces all of those departments into the same room to align around the exact same problem, protecting consumer trust. It changes the internal mechanics so that decisions aren't made in silos. Coherence internally is really the only way to project confidence externally.
So what does this all mean? If I'm managing a brand today, and I think I've got a decent job updating our website, knocking out some internal walls, and aligning my teams, what is the practical bottom line test? Like, how does a brand know if their transparency infrastructure is actually working in the real world right now?
The source material offers a very unforgiving but very accurate functional metric. It's called the 2-minute test.
Okay, 2 minutes.
Yeah. If a concerned shopper standing in an aisle or a retail buyer reviewing a category or a journalist writing a story cannot find a clear, sourced, and human-readable answer about your ingredients in less than 2 minutes, your transparency infrastructure is failing. It is not functioning as a trust asset.
2 minutes. Wow. That is the entire window you have. If you miss it, they put your product back on the shelf, they pull out their phone, and they just find a competitor who has already built their open kitchen.
Exactly. The consumer will not wait while your organization hunts for documents, argues over phrasing, and clears a statement with the legal department. The speed of trust has just massively accelerated.
Yeah, it really has. Let's bring this all together. The deep dive mission today was to wrap our heads around this massive shift in the consumer goods landscape. And the undeniable reality is that the ingredient safety crisis isn't some distant future prediction. It is actively happening right now.
Absolutely.
You have brutal regulatory clocks ticking down like that massive August 2026 EU packaging deadline with zero transitional period. You have consumers aggressively interrogating labels armed with smartphones that instantly demystify your supply chain. The days of relying on legacy brand familiarity to just coast through a controversy are entirely over.
It requires a fundamental operational shift. I mean, transparency must be built as permanent infrastructure. An open kitchen designed long before the health inspector ever arrives, not deployed as a panicked PR statement when the crisis is already making headlines.
Exactly. So if these issues are raising questions in your own category, or if you're suddenly realizing your brand might spectacularly fail that 2-minute test, Denise Drummond-Dunn at C3 Centricity can help. Be sure to subscribe to the C3 Centricity channel. Visit c3centricity.com for more of these insights. And you can even book a free business makeover session to start building that infrastructure today.
And to close today, I want to leave you with a question to mull over as you go about your day. The next time you walk down that grocery aisle and pick up a familiar product you've loyally bought for years, ask yourself, if you scanned that barcode today and discovered a controversial ingredient hidden inside, would you patiently wait for the brand to issue a legal statement? Or would you instantly switch to a competitor?
That's a great point.
Does legacy familiarity truly equal trust in your own life anymore?